They sat across from me at a polished table, with polite smiles and carefully rehearsed lines. "Ethan, you've been instrumental to our growth, but we're moving in a new direction." After 11 years of building every wire, every server, every silent safety net holding this company together, they were replacing me. Just like that. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply smiled, signed the papers, and left. Because what they didn't realize, what they had never even thought to check, was that every beat of their system, every seamless day they took for granted, had my fingerprints woven into its core. They fired the backbone, but forgot who built the bones. And what came next wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was simply the unfolding of a plan I'd been preparing long before they even noticed me. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or replaced like you were nothing, stay with me. Because sometimes, the quietest ones leave the loudest legacy. When I first walked through Riverton's battered front doors, I wasn't looking for a career. I was just a guy in his 30s, fresh off a divorce, sleeping on my brother's couch, trying to find something, anything, to steady my life. They needed an IT technician. Someone to plug the holes in a system barely hanging on with duct tape and prayers. I saw more than holes. I saw opportunity. Piece by piece, late at night when no one was watching, I rebuilt everything, from our network security to our manufacturing command systems. When the Northeast blackout hit, we were the only plant still running. When cyber attacks took down 3 competitors, we stayed online. No press releases. No plaques. No speeches. Just quiet victories stacked one after another, until our entire operation was quietly running on frameworks I designed. I didn't own the company on paper. But in every meaningful way, I had built its nervous system with my own 2 hands. The lesson? Sometimes, the most powerful foundations are laid by the people no one thinks to thank. And while I was proud of the system I had built, I also knew something deeper. If you create quietly, you also have to protect quietly. Which brings us to the day everything changed, the lunch that wasn't about steak or strategy, but about setting the stage for betrayal. The first real warning didn't come with a memo. It came with a consultant. One day, some fresh-faced guy in a tailored suit wandered into our server room asking basic questions, things no outsider should have even known to ask. When I politely pushed back, he just smiled and said, "Executive team's orders." After that, the small changes began. Access to board meeting minutes? Gone. Weekly strategy sessions with the CEO? Cancelled. Sudden audits, surprise reviews, new faces asking about systems I'd built from scratch, but phrasing their curiosity like it was casual. At first, I told myself it was paranoia. That's what loyalty does, it makes you second-guess the alarms blaring in your gut. Then came Nathan Blake, Harrison's nephew. Fresh MIT graduate. Bright-eyed. Perfect LinkedIn profile. Introduced with a handshake and a glowing speech about modernization. From the moment Nathan walked through the door, I knew. This wasn't about fresh vision. It was about a quiet replacement, and they were hoping I'd be too loyal, too proud, or too blindsided to stop it. Little did they know. I wasn't just watching them. I was already preparing for a move of my own. Because when you spend a decade building a system, you don't just build technology. You build leverage. The invitation to lunch should have tipped me off. Maxwell's was the kind of restaurant where deals were closed, or endings were delivered with a polite smile. I showed up anyway, wearing my best neutral expression. Preston Campbell, our CEO, was already seated, swirling a glass of wine like he was auditioning for a commercial. "Derek, you've been invaluable," he began, slicing into his steak with surgical precision, "but we're moving in a new direction. Fresh leadership. Fresh energy. Translation. We found someone younger, cheaper, and easier to control." I smiled, nodded, signed the NDA he slid across the table. Because I already knew. 3 months earlier, I'd seen the server access logs. Saw Nathan poking around in my work. Watched them systematically copy every system I had built. It wasn't anger that I felt in that moment, sitting across from Preston. It was clarity. They thought I'd quietly hand over a decade of blood, sweat, and midnight fixes. They thought loyalty made me blind. But loyalty without respect? That's not a virtue. That's a weapon, and they just handed it to me. As Preston toasted to my next adventure, I raised my glass too. Not to endings, but to the beginning of the quietest, smartest move I'd ever make. The next morning, I walked into Riverton's office as if nothing had changed. No drama. No grand speeches. Just a man quietly packing up a decade of his life, and something more important than photos or awards. Knowledge. Real, irreplaceable, lived knowledge. I spent the next 2 weeks smiling through transition meetings, training Nathan on systems he barely understood. Every time he nodded like he was absorbing it all, I bit back a smile. Because what they didn't know was that the real engine behind our infrastructure wasn't sitting in neat documents or charts. It lived in the custom patches. The unspoken contingencies. The tiny, vital decisions only experience could teach, decisions no outsider could replicate. Meanwhile, I met quietly with Vanessa and Luis, my most trusted team members, laying the foundation for what would come next. I didn't poison the well I had helped dig. I didn't sabotage. I simply made sure that when they tried to run without the person who built the machine, they'd realize just how much they'd misunderstood its heart. It wasn't revenge I was chasing. It was respect, and sometimes, you have to let the cracks show naturally for people to appreciate the foundation they took for granted. As I turned in my badge and shook Preston's hand one last time, he smiled like a man who believed the battle was won. He didn't know the war hadn't even started yet. The weekend after my final day, while most people would be grieving the end of a chapter, I was busy building a new one. Quietly. Carefully. Strategically. I gathered every scrap of proof, emails, development logs, version histories, showing that System Core, the lifeline of Riverton's tech operations, was my intellectual property. Not out of bitterness. Out of principle. If you spend years creating something from scratch, you don't just leave it behind for someone else to harvest. I filed provisional patents through an old law school friend, securing every piece that was legally mine before they could twist the story. I also set up an independent server, a clean environment running the original, unmodified versions of my systems, just in case I ever needed to prove the true blueprint. But I didn't break their operations. I didn't sabotage them. I respected what I had built, even if they didn't respect me. It wasn't about blowing everything up. It was about making sure that when the cracks started to appear, and everyone would know exactly who had held it all together for so long. The setup wasn't flashy. It was patient. It was quiet. Just like the way I had built everything else that truly mattered. And as the final security protocols clicked into place, I leaned back in my chair, looked out at the sunset, and smiled. Because sometimes, the best comeback doesn't roar. It hums softly in the background, waiting for the right moment. It didn't take long. Barely 2 weeks after my departure, the first cracks began to show. It started small, a delayed shipment notification that never triggered. Then, a production line glitch that should have auto-corrected but didn't. Minor things, at first. Things the new leadership brushed off as growing pains. But anyone who had worked the floor, who had lived through those brutal holiday seasons or those all-night maintenance cycles, could feel it. The system wasn't breathing the way it used to. By the third week, a major client contract was in jeopardy. Deadlines missed. Quality controls failing. The once flawless machine was sputtering. And no amount of emergency meetings or new strategic plans could mask it. I heard whispers through the grapevine. Luis sent a late-night text. Line 2 down again. Nathan panicking. Blaming legacy systems. Legacy systems. The same systems that had kept them afloat through ransomware attacks, regional blackouts, and market crashes. The same systems they dismissed the moment I walked out the door. I wasn't happy to see the chaos. Honestly, part of me grieved for the work, the long nights, the pride, the battles fought to build something strong. But another part of me knew. Sometimes, people only recognize your worth when the absence of your effort becomes undeniable. The foundation they took for granted wasn't holding anymore. And the deeper the cracks spread, the more visible the truth became. They hadn't just lost a worker. They had lost the architect. And the collapse had only just begun. There's a funny thing about systems: when they fail, it's loud. Emails fly. Phones ring. Emergency meetings stack up faster than solutions. And every single panic-filled moment carries a quiet reminder. The person who could have prevented this isn't here anymore. I didn't gloat. I didn't send a smug text. I didn't post a passive-aggressive quote on LinkedIn. I just stayed silent and built. While Riverton scrambled to patch the leaks, I was busy crafting a new life. Consulting offers rolled in. Old clients, suppliers, even competitors, all suddenly very interested in the guy behind the curtain. Funny how quickly the world changes once people realize who was holding it together. Luis and Vanessa came on board first. A few others followed quietly, handing in their resignations with small, knowing smiles. We weren't just rebuilding careers, we were rebuilding trust, purpose, and pride. Meanwhile, Riverton's quarterly numbers plummeted. Clients fled. Production stalled. And Nathan, the fresh-faced nephew with all the modern solutions, was quietly removed from his post. No loud revenge. No public spectacle. Just the undeniable, slow, steady truth rising to the surface. Value speaks loudest when you don't have to. Looking back, it wasn't about winning. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right, silently, steadily, and completely. And the best part? I hadn't even shown them the real next move yet. I used to think security came from being needed. That if I built the perfect system, the strongest safety net, people would value it, and value me. But real security? It comes from building something they can't take away. With Luis, Vanessa, and a handful of the best people I ever worked with, we didn't just form a team, we created a movement. We launched our own consulting firm, small at first, operating out of a rented co-working space with second-hand desks and too much coffee. But the difference was night and day. No politics. No fake smiles. No boardrooms where you had to justify your existence to people who didn't understand your worth. We picked our clients carefully, companies that valued integrity over image, systems over slogans. And word traveled fast. Our calendar filled up within weeks. By month 6, we were turning down more projects than we accepted. Funny how the same systems I once built to keep another company afloat were now the foundation of something far bigger, something that belonged to us. And in every meeting, every handshake, every project we completed, there was a quiet, steady pulse. This time, we build it on our terms. Brick by brick. With heart, with grit, with the invisible kind of strength that doesn't need applause to be powerful. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving freely, fully, finally. Looking back, it's easy to see the moments where it all shifted. The lunch at Maxwell's, the revoked credentials, the quiet betrayals dressed as business decisions. But the truth is, I didn't lose anything that day. I gained something far more valuable. I gained proof that my worth was never tied to a title, or a company name, or someone else's approval. It was in the systems I built, the teams I nurtured, the invisible scaffolding that kept everything standing when no one else even knew it needed support. Walking away wasn't a defeat. It was a beginning. The moment I stopped building safety nets for people who didn't value them, and started building a legacy on my own terms. Some victories aren't loud. They don't come with standing ovations or front-page headlines. They come in the quiet. In the steady rebuild, in the sunrise over a small lake cabin, in a life reclaimed piece by piece. If you're standing at your own crossroads, feeling unseen, underestimated, overlooked, Remember this. You are not invisible. Your work, your resilience, your quiet brilliance, it matters. And sometimes, the best way to win is simply to walk away stronger. After everything, I realized, true success isn't about titles or recognition. It's about knowing your value, even when others overlook it. I didn't lose when they pushed me out. I built something stronger, on my terms. Sometimes the quiet victories, the ones no one sees coming, are the ones that matter most. If you're feeling underestimated, invisible, or replaceable, remember, your worth isn't up for debate. Keep building. Keep believing. Your breakthrough is coming. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me below, have you ever been counted out, only to rise higher than anyone expected? I read every word, because your story matters too. Let's keep growing, quietly, but undeniably.